People wonder, what does it take to be a peak performer? What does it take to overcome something or become something? How do you get the courage to face things? Well, first you have to stand in front of the mirror and see that the problem begins with you. The moment you can assess what you can be, then you can set up a plan of how to become something. Every day I endeavor to try to meet people that change lives, beginning with their own. Today is no different. Today I'm with Richard Godfrey. You're about to learn why he became a peak performer. Richard, thank you for coming on with me.
Thanks for having me.
Well,
I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm honored that you are here. I want to ask you something, if you don't mind. Rather than begin with the accolades and the things that you've accomplished, could you tell me about your upbringing, your growth, your development? Where were you born, and what was it like where you were born?
I was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It was the late 1950s, and my parents had been married for 2 whole years and hadn't had a child. So they panicked, and they were able to adopt. And so I was adopted at the age of 8 days.
Wow.
I tell people that my life began not with my mother in labor, but with my mother. They lived in a basement apartment of a little house. And back then there was only one phone in the house. So the landlady upstairs called to say, "There's a call for you from Calgary." My mother ran up the stairs to get the phone, fell, and broke her ankle. So that's the pain that accompanied my birth on her behalf.
Let me ask you something. Most people that had, and thank you for even being open about that, most people that have been adopted, even though they are loved into a family, and you 8 days, you had no other experiences to even recall anything. How were you able to find contentment in being thankful for those parents rather than questioning, where else should I have been?
You know, I thought about that a lot, and I think I cannot remember a time that I did not know that I was adopted. In other words, I have a sister who's adopted as well, so 3 natural-born children, 2 adopted, adopted from a different source. She's younger than me. But my parents never made a big deal out of it. I mean, it was just a way to come into the family. And so it felt very normal, very natural. I'm grateful to my birth parents, specifically my birth mother. I know nothing about her other than just feeling grateful. My mom is the mom who raised me.
Well, one of the things I love about what you said there is that I'm thankful that she gave birth to me. A lot of times we will feel like if a person wasn't there to rear us or whatever, that they've abandoned us. When I think of that, I also think about the origin of even Christ. Like, to have your heavenly Father, the Father create you, send you into a woman, a teenager, and then for that origin to begin with the idea that they should stone her for cheating and to believe that there's a miracle and say, you know what, this was the plan. And so I don't say it was God's plan for your mom to give birth, but it was God's plan also for you to be with the mom and dad that you had. What things did you learn from mom? What things did you learn from dad that show up in your life today?
Well, it's not uncommon that my mother had that kind of motherly love, that, no limits, perfect love for me. My father loved me very, very much. But it became clear early in life that he struggled to figure out how to parent me, because I'm an A-type personality. He's not, and so early in my life, and I only learned this in hindsight as I became a parent. My grandfather began to assist my father in parenting this very headstrong, outspoken little boy, and so I loved my father deeply. But my grandfather, my mother's father, my maternal grandfather, I tell people all the time that everything I know in life that really matters, I learned from him.
Wow. There's something that is powerful about that. The humility of your father even allow his father, because sometimes there's that pride that would get there. But the fact that you even have that lineage, you truly have been blessed with that. When you mentioned that you were a parent, how many kids do you have?
We have 2. We have a son and a daughter in that order.
And from them, what things have you said you learned how to look at things parenting from your father that you would put into yours, because what you learned later. What's the one thing you wanted to pass on to both of those kids?
this is a little bit of a long way of answering your question, but
Okay.
when we have a dinner party at our house, one of the things we like to do is have a question of the night.
Okay.
So when people sit down around the table, there'll be a name tag, because we don't want them to always sit next to their spouse. And then on
Okay.
the opposite side will be a question. And my favorite question of the night, these are things to stimulate conversation, is if you could only have one characteristic guaranteed in your child's future spouse or partner, what would that be?
Oh, that's a heck of a question there.
Well, because you know what happens?
Yeah.
They want 30.
Yeah.
They're like, well, this, but also this and that.
Yeah, right,
and so the distillation process takes some time, but it's very powerful. And it has never, ever not ended up in the exact same place, which is I want them to be kind. If I have to obviously they want more than that.
Yeah.
But if I have to
it
just
boils
pick
down
one,
to that.
I want them. And we have been blessed, my wife Heather and I. Our children have many, many talents, but they are profoundly kind humans.
Well, I think that stems from you and your wife. You said something to me the other day when we met. You mentioned the fact that you met your wife when you were how old?
13.
And when did you guys marry?
So we started dating. In my culture, you don't date till you're 16, but we
Right.
dated under the radar till we were 16. I mean, we were doing crazy stuff. Like I would say I was going to my friend Gary's house. I'd get on my bike, obviously couldn't drive yet, drive like bike at speed 3 miles to her house, spend like 20 minutes with her, bike all the way back and pretend that I'd just been around the corner at Gary's house. So we really started under the radar. So we dated from 13 until in my faith we go on a mission. So I went on an LDS mission, and we're completely separated at that point. No phone calls, no nothing. And 5 days after I got back and we saw each other for the first time in 2 years, we were married.
Wow. Man, that's true love. Because you guys had seen each other, you were like, man, this is destiny. And like rearing your children, you mentioned on a mission. What did you learn during those 2 years you dedicated? What did you learn? Because most young people don't do what you did. The general public, kids don't go to a foreign culture, learn a language, go and impact their lives, and then come back. But what did that stuff teach you at that young age?
The most important thing I learned is actually a story in my book. But I was a typical 19, 20-year-old brash, know-it-all, immature jerk. And I was out one day walking with a friend of mine I developed a friendship with. I was in England. I was just outside of London. And we're walking along the street, and this guy's mixing cement, but on the street, not in a wheelbarrow, not in anything, just with a shovel in the street. And because I'm arrogant and cocky, I say to my friend Ben, I said, Ben, I thought you guys were a first world country. Don't you know how to use a mixer or a wheelbarrow? And then he, being much wiser and more mature than me, he said something that has fundamentally impacted my life. He said, Richard, when you get older and more mature, you're going to learn that there's 3 conditions in life. Right, because there are things that are right, wrong, and different. And most of life is just different.
Now that's a word there. Right, wrong, and different.
And so that did fundamentally change my worldview, because as my wife Heather and I have had this opportunity to travel all over the world, we have seen people do things that in my youth and my arrogance I might have considered wrong.
Right.
But now realize they're just different.
Yeah.
And that they are successful doing things very differently than me. And so it's humbling. It allows you to open yourself to other people and say, you don't have to be exactly like me for us to have a relationship, for us to have a connection.
I got to tell you something that connects us in this. So growing up, now, you were fortunate. You got to find your girlfriend and wife at 12, 13. That's not the case for most of us. We're not able to identify. You have a super radar. You could see her coming a mile away and you jumped on it. I can remember the first girl I saw and I liked, and some other guys liked her, and me being disabled, I couldn't couldn't crack the code. I couldn't just go tell her. In fact, that was probably a struggle I had internally of like how to approach somebody with that. But I can remember we get to college, and I went to a Christian college, and there was about 8 black students out of 7,000 total students. And so it was a conservative school in Greenville, South Carolina. And I got a scholarship there, so free education, I'm going. I get there, and the school had a rule of no interracial dating. First time I had ever had that rule. Well, I'm talking about in 1992. This is still going on. But I'm like, free education, I'm not worried about whatever. If I can go to school free, I just do it. So we're there, and there was a girl who came on campus, a black girl, and the 8 of us had been really close with each other until this girl shows up. And so we had made a pact with each other. We're not going to go competing over some girl. We're going to stay brothers, stay encouraging. Well, about 6 weeks later, we started looking around. It was like, first we were all like, she's pretty ugly, and then we're like, you know what? She's got a nice personality. She has good hair, though. We started seeing positives in her as time went on, right? But it's setting the table for us to compete for that one. And so finally, I was like, I think that's the one for me. And so I tell one of the guys, and they were like, no, actually, she's for me. And so the 8 of us quit being friends because we competed for this girl. And so then, as we were competing for this girl, we would go to her and tell her different things about each other to try to get her not to be interested in each other. So I would say, hey, listen, Jermaine doesn't read his Bible every night. And she's like, what? I was like, yeah, he's not. He's just not dedicated. If I were you, I wouldn't. And so he trumped me by saying, well, James, his children might end up being. And they were like, so he put a real doubt in her head. So now I go back. Now, he comes from drug addicts. He didn't, but I had to throw that in there to try to even the scale. And so the girl, man, she rose to the point where the 8 of us were all competing for. And so she told us to write an essay about what our 5-year plan was after graduation, and we would need a letter of recommendation from our local pastor. And she wanted in order to go on a date with her. We're like, man, I'm not doing that. There's no way in the world I'd do it. We ended up doing that. I thought, if we all said we wouldn't, I turned mine in and found out they did too. And I'm sitting here, and I'm thinking, I wish I'd had the superpower you had to be able to identify that 3 miles down the road is the love of your life. What does Heather mean to you today?
Well, so I'll tell you what the superpower is. Mm-hmm. So we had moved across the country, and we're a church, and we're going to Sunday school. So I said to an adult, I'm like 13, right? Where do I go? And they said, go down the hall, last door on the right.
Okay.
So I go down the hall, open the door, and directly in my line of sight is this woman. She is snapping her gum. Her chair is propped up against the wall. She's swinging her legs. She has clearly got super attitude and super confidence. She's not the quiet, retiring type. And instantly I said, that's her.
Wow.
And I pursued her from that moment.
So you didn't have to have a Jermaine or anything to compete with?
Well, no, you only have to compete if other people have showed up. You lock that deal down fast.
That is awesome. I love the fact that you mentioned how many years have you been married now?
We were married in 1980, so 44 years.
Wow. What commitment. You guys have to have been going through so many different experiences, so many different evolutions. What's been the key to being able to stay in love through the course of time when so many people are running out? Because you mentioned being kind. And I know that kindness is a thing that you sought for, you want the world to have. And so kindness is important. So is kindness played a role in being able to evolve with from the time you were teenagers to young adults to as you got older? What kept you in love?
I think it's a form of kindness, and it evolves, it gets stronger all the time, but it is this profound, deep desire not to hurt the other person. So everything. So it's not about I've made a commitment, I'm going to keep it, or any of that stuff. It's that the worst thing that I could do is cause you hurt or harm. And so I don't want to study tonight when I'm in university. I don't want to study tonight. I just want to watch TV. But then I'm like, that could harm my ability to get my degree and us do the things that we have decided together we want to do. So it is this deep desire not to do what's right, but to do nothing that would harm the other person.
Well, it's not duty. It's making sure that they experience love for you. And because you are putting them first. You have taken that philosophy, the love you have for her, the dedication you have for her. You've embodied that for your kids. And then you continue to get them to have this family time. I love the creativity you had there. When it came to your personal life, and now it evolves into your professional, what is it that what career path have you taken that led you to now?
I got derailed. I had spent, since I was a little boy, growing up with a number of family members who were medical doctors or in the medical profession, wanting to be a doctor. And then it came to a time in my life where I had to make a decision where I would involve myself medically in procedures that I was morally opposed to. And when I said that unless it was medically required, I did not want to be part of certain things. I was told that I had to either be involved to that level or not continue into medical school. And so I walked away.
Wow. Wait. You walked away from medical school. So the whole idea that parents grow up with the idea, they dream of, that the kids can be a doctor or a lawyer. Fulfillment of a dream, the goal, the destiny, the determination, the hard work it took to get there. And you said, man, when it comes to my faith, what I believe, you had the fortitude to say, I'm going to walk away from that. Do you realize how lucrative that career could have been for you? And so by choosing to get derailed, where did it go from there?
Well, short term, you got to do two things. You got to go home and tell Heather. And I'll go back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
And then I go into the bedroom, I close the door, and I cry for 3 hours straight. Just laid on the bed and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. Because that was the end of my life as I knew it.
Wow.
But and it was kind of the end of Heather's life because we had made a decision that she would be the primary caregiver and I would be the primary earner in our relationship. And so then I came out, and this is who she is. Her first response was, so what do we do now?
Wow.
No, you've let me down. No, what were you thinking? No, why didn't we talk about this? Just what will we do now?
You know what I love about that? That is instant support. It is instant credibility, validation, and love all at one time. One of my favorite movies is 300. The storyline, historically, and all that stuff, but that in the movie, only this line that really stands out. King Leonidas is about to take men into battle, and his wife is preparing to see him go off, and the odds are they're going to lose. And in the history they did, but even in losing, they became epic because of what they put up, the valiant fight, 300 versus 10,000. And the line that is used, she says to her husband, here's your sword. Either come back with it or come back on it. And then it is just empowering that I am that behind you, whether you win or lose, but you go and represent us. And for your wife to stand there and look at you, what do we do next then? The fact that she had already turned the page, that was a good ride for 3 miles on that bike, brother. You know, because what you generated in equity of a person showed up there. So, and I also love the fact that as men, we oftentimes will hide in emotion. Like, you lose a job, I shook it off and I just walk like a man. But no, there are moments where you need to have that moment where you break down so that you can rebuild. Because you buried a version of yourself that day. and the idea of what you would be, the titles you might hold, the prestige, all those things that come with it, you let that go because you had to take a stand with your morals. You could easily have folded. You went home, you regrouped. What happens next?
So the next is, by any definition, a miracle. So the word gets out, because, I mean, everybody knew that this was the path I wanted to take. So the word gets out. So somebody that I knew in my community comes up to me and says, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, I think I'm going to go work on a PhD. I mean, I had great grades. I said, I'll just go back, apply, and work on a PhD and then teach. And he said, well, would you be willing to fly to Salt Lake and talk to some people? And I had actually lived, at the time we were living in Ontario, Canada. But I had gone to school here in Utah, and I lived here as a young child when my parents were going to school here. So I'll take a free trip to Utah. So I flew out here to meet people I had no clue who they were. So therefore, I'm not intimidated. And I was going to meet with Hiram Smith and Dick Winwood and Arlen Crouch, who are the founders of Franklin Covey.
Wait. You said that like you were mentioning McDonald's you drove past. What company?
Franklin Covey. At that time,
That Franklin Covey.
International. That Franklin.
Okay.
And that Hiram Smith and that founding group.
Wow.
And so, but I mean, I'm just like, yeah, I'll go see him. I didn't know what there was no mention of a job possibility or anything.
Right.
Just go see him. So they fly me down. They put me in the Marriott downtown Salt Lake. I go out to their offices out there, and I'm sitting down, and they're like, just kind of like you. They're like, tell me about yourself and this and that. And I'm running my mouth like I am now, very, very cocky, confident. And about 10 minutes in, Arlen Crouch, who was the CEO at the time, asked me to leave the room. And of course, I'm not offended. That my face didn't do what your face just did, because I had no expectations. I was just out for a free trip.
All right.
So then a few minutes later, the internal counsel for the company, Val Christian, comes out and he says, come with me to my office. Once again, I have no clue. He takes a Post-it note and writes a number on it. And he says, Arlen wants you to come work for us. And I said, I'm not really looking for work. I'm going to grad school, blah, blah, blah. And he hands me this Post-it note, and it had a number on which for a student was a huge number. And he said, Arlen says if you'll start today, you'll support the Canada team, but if you'll start today, he'll backdate your pay 30 days. So once again, we're back to Heather. So I call Heather and I said, what do you think we ought to do? And she said, I think we ought to do it. And that then became the next 17 years of our life.
Well, that's good. Man, I really was afraid you were about to say something different. Like, he gave me that number, and I called my wife, and I said, you know what? I'm not taking it. He tore it up and walked out, and no, but it's good. So why do you think that door opened for you? Because I know that people be wondering and wonder, like, first of all, I think that you wouldn't have even been open for that opportunity had you not turned down something for a moral stand, right? So you had a ground. When you said you walked in with confidence, the confidence came because you knew who you were. You already had a plan, one way or the other. No expectation. You walked in. So you weren't going to be let down or any of those things because you don't know what's going to happen. But because you went in confident in your skill set and who you were, and also in your heart set, you were able to have a conversation. And when they put it on a sheet of paper, you didn't immediately jump at it, right? Nor did you take offense when they said step out of the room. I think that's a key. There will be ups and downs. You will have life take you, and you'll get derailed. But when you get derailed, that just means there's a new path. And when you get to that new path, you got to walk in with the confidence as if you always have a path. And then after that moment, when you sit there and you looked at it, you still went and got counsel from people that matter. You didn't just jump on greed and say, okay. But then you got paid. And I notice you keep saying Canada, but I haven't heard you say A. I don't know if that's just
no. Well,
is that a rumor?
Yeah, we became U.S. citizens a few years ago,
okay.
So we've eliminated that.
Okay, all right. Well, listen, I just make sure we're talking about the same Canada. But when you took it from there, so 17 years, that's a great career. You could just continue. You could just skate from there. What changed after 17 years?
There was something that Hiram Smith, who founded Franklin, was passionate about, that I, as this little peon way down the line, was passionate about. And Hiram's sister connected us, and we decided we were more passionate about this than his maintaining his huge profile there and my remaining employed. So we both resigned, and we started, and I got to work with the founder of Franklin to start a new little company, a little boutique consulting firm, which is where I spent my time up until Hiram passed away just before COVID.
Wow. Brother, I want to dive into that for a moment. To quit for moral grounds the first time, to work 17 years, and then to get rid of that security, to go with a visionary to do something. When did it go from he was an employer to a brotherhood mentorship?
That's all credit to him. I mean, he remembered me, but I mean, he was running the largest corporate training company in the history of the world. We're talking $1 billion. Training companies don't make $1 billion or near that. But he was humble enough that he was willing to take me on. I was called a partner, but I was really an apprentice. And as I've told his wife, Gail, many, many times, the great blessing is that Gail and Hiram fed my family for many, many years when they didn't have to. I mean, how do you pivot like you're describing? For me, it's very simple to describe. You have to know somebody, or better, somebodies have your back. And what I always have known is that Heather and God have had my back.
That's powerful, man.
So is it gonna get awkward? Is it gonna get difficult? Are times gonna get tough? Yeah. But see, I worry that a lot of people don't think anybody has their back.
Yeah. Most people feel like we can't trust people. And so I found that when people feel like they can't trust people, they end up doing something untrustworthy, because they want to get you before you get them. And it happens so often that people start to have guard up about it. I've known myself to have taken people and thought I saw something in them and thought I'm going to take them with me on a journey. And just because you want to take them on the elevator to the top floor doesn't mean they don't want to get off on the fifth. And when they're ready to get off, let them go and not take an offense at it. So you mentioned that he passed away. Just for a moment, can you tell me what he meant to you as a man, or what stood out about that particular visionary? Yeah,
my life, if I try to simplify it, has been shaped by only a handful of people. My father, my grandfather, Heather, of course, and Hiram.
Wow.
Because remember, I was going into the medical world, which by being a relative of medical people, I kind of knew what that would look like. I'd not been a business person. I'd certainly not been an entrepreneur. And to suddenly have the opportunity to work with one, his accolades filled walls.
Right.
As one of the great entrepreneurs of the late 20th century in America. And then to have him say, well, why don't you come be my partner?
Right.
Those are the people that shaped my life.
When a Moses of a man like that exits, it's often hard for Joshua to pivot. What's something, a word that he spoke to you that stands out? When I mention his name now, about when you're thinking about him, what comes out when you think of him, something he said to you? What stands out?
Well, it's two words, because they were his two words. He was obsessed with the idea of what he called abundance mentality. And Darwin describes the opposite with his scarcity mentality, which is we have to compete for everything. Zero sum. If you win, I lose. If you get in front of me in line, you get the last burger, I don't get a burger. Abundance mentality is simply we're not cutting up a static pie. The pie gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and so there's going to be enough for everyone. Hiram made an obscene amount of money by most people's when Franklin International became Franklin Covey and went public.
Right.
He then went and gave away almost all of it.
Wow.
And that's the lesson I learned from him, which is don't hold on to things so heavily. Whether it's God, which is, I believe it is, or heaven, or fate, or whatever someone believes in, but karma, you'll be provided for. You will have sufficient for your needs. If you are coming to the table honestly, with integrity, you're willing to work, you're willing to do the things other people don't want to do, you're going to be just fine.
Well, let me ask you something. When you got word that he had transitioned, what did you decide to do next? What were you going to do with that? Because he had poured a lot into you. What do you do next?
We've probably all heard the story about the guy who plants an oak, like a seed to grow an oak tree. Right. And somebody says to him, you're never going to live long enough to see this tree. And he's like, I'm not planting it for me. I'm planting it for, the next 50 generations. Mm-hmm. So when Hiram passed, he already had put in place relationships based on his credibility and character that reached out to me and said, Hiram said, we should talk to you. So he had not only taken care of me, but he made sure I would be taken care of moving forward. Mm. Now, there's no guarantees, but there also wasn't falling off a cliff.
Mm. You took this in. Where did your career go after that?
Well, my career goal really evolved during COVID, which is human beings have always been, to some degree, contentious. But it felt like to me, so I'm not saying this is science, it felt like to me that during COVID, our isolation, our separation, the level of contention within our society, our nation, the world generally, was just exploding, was just growing at a geometric pace. Mm-hmm. And so once again, I went to Heather and I said, I think I have to quit my job. I want to write a book because I think I know why contention occurs and how we can cure it. Now, my wife, who you can tell is so supportive, she also sometimes thinks I'm a walking, talking idiot. And so she says to me, she said, what qualifies you to write a book on those subjects? And I didn't have an answer. Mm. So I said, okay, I won't quit yet. I got to think about that. And it took a few days, and I came back to her and I said, you and I, meaning Heather, you and I, are experts in the solution to contention, because the solution to contention is connection. Mm. And she said, you never studied that in school. I said, no. We've studied it for the last 40 years.
Yeah, but you can't go just past that like that. Say that again. The solution
to contention
is
connection.
Is connection. Wow. That's a word. All right, go on, man. That's a stand there. The solution to contention is connection.
Yeah. And so let me just say something to the side on that, and then I'll go forward. Mm-hmm. I have always believed the following, and I don't know whether I've stolen this idea or whether it crystallized in my mind, but I live by it, and that is everything in life is crystal clear until it involves someone you love. Mm. So people who have these definitive viewpoints on race or gender or whatever, then they wake up one day and their child comes to them and says, Dad, I want you to know I'm gay. Mm-hmm. Suddenly it's not theory. Suddenly it's not, suddenly you got to get your arms around it literally because this is someone you love. Yeah. And so that idea that connection is part of this idea that don't be so sure of things. Wait until it involves somebody that you love, then let's have a conversation. So anyway, I'm sorry to get distracted.
Let me just pick up on that. I don't like blood, right? I don't like heights. I don't like blood. Those are things that I'm against. I vote against it every time. So when it comes to seeing people bleed or changing diapers, with the babies I didn't mind initially until they started getting bad and smelly, But then I can remember how nasty I thought that was and how I couldn't be around those cells until it was my grandmother laying there. All of a sudden, that trach didn't seem, taking ice cubes across the dry lips, all those things were different. Making sure that she was taken care of, no bed sores, is different. You're right, see, when it hits home, it changes everything. It goes from theory of what you wouldn't do, what you tolerate. I'm dogmatic about it until it has your name. And so what did you do to help? When you started to write the book, tell me a little bit about it. Tell me what the book is about.
Okay, so if we start from this premise that everything's crystal clear until it involves someone you love, then the pathway to love, or at least respect, is connection. So, when Heather and I sit down for a very simple meal in Vietnam with a family that we've never met before, we're connecting. And all of a sudden, all the history or dogma that I might have about people from Vietnam is very, very hard to hold on to.
Right.
And it's that stuff you hold on to that's the root of contention. So the book became very, very simple. If we can connect with people, contention will not disappear, but it will dramatically decrease. So then it became, and you know this as an expert in motivational speaking and all that you do, unless an idea is accessible and useful, it dies on the vine. In other words, if it's too complicated or I can't remember it, then great idea, have a nice life. So then working with Jeremy and our team, we reduced it to really there were only 4 things we had to do to connect to people. And they were 4 simple things that everybody could start doing immediately. But they were also a little bit of a pivot from the way I grew up.
Okay. You mentioned something I always want, when you mentioned Jeremy, because people don't know Jeremy could be any, Jeremy Johnson, Jeremiah Smith, but tell me, Jeremy, who is Jeremy to you, and tell me a little bit about Jeremy.
Jeremy Brown, and people who are watching this won't know, but he's just sitting outside of camera range. He's the co-founder of our company, and he's a dear friend. I met him in the period between when Hiram passed away and I chose to stop work. Jeremy is the left brain. He's the technical, detailed, organized, careful guy. To my right brain, creative, impulsive, let's just hug everybody and it'll be fine.
Right. So what I love about that is that now, whether Jeremy Brown knows it or not, he's part of the lineage from Franklin Covey through you to there's a storyline there. A man that changed and touched so much of the 20th century is now that part of the DNA because of the connection that is there. There's legacy that you guys are building together, and I like how you see him as an equal. And like, well, I came from this, and then you saw value in what he has. Again, when it comes to telling people, we're always trying to teach other people. How do you find somebody that can work in their strengths and allow you to keep yours? How did you come across connecting with Jeremy? What stood out about him that said, this is a guy I'm willing to hitch my wagon with so that we can go forward?
I have many weaknesses, but one of my strengths is I think I am more than most people self-aware. And not only self-aware, but comfortable with it. Not that I'm accepting weakness, but that I'm saying, these are my strengths. These are the things I can do. And finding people who can do the things I can't do and not feeling diminished by that, I think is something some people struggle with because they're like, everything's a competition. And I'm like, no, not everything's a competition. And so if I can do A and we need B to get to C and you can do B, then, let's get together.
Wow. See, I think most people think there's there's the idea that you can go in and win a battle by yourself. It's true, and it's not. I mean, I used to watch movies like Rambo and be like, how in the world could this guy have such great aim and accuracy, standing up and just going left to right with machine guns, and he hit everyone, just spraying, and then he could give away his location with screaming, and no one could find him. They would shoot all the leaves around him, but never him, right? And it was like no one wins with Rambos. People win by working as a team, and there's nothing as empty, I found, as a reward that is only for you. If you go in and you did it alone, you have all the glory, you have all the reward, all that stuff. There's no one to even record your victory. There's no one that even knows the story. There's no honor in it. But when you have other people that you've partnered with and you win and you've changed, the contention that you might have in sharpening each other, that's what it means when it's talking about iron sharpens iron. You have to have someone that can help bounce things off, click things through, disagree with, and come to solutions. Because if in the spiritual sense, it says that one can send 1,000 to flight, but two can send 10,000. If I'm that much more powerful when we connect, that's the reason why you need to connect and partner with people who are like-minded. Maybe he's left and you're right, Brian, but like-minded in the sense of mission and purpose and character. Tell me what you and Jeremy are doing today.
So what we have done is we've written a book. Mm-hmm. We've created a training program that's available, to organizations, individuals, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Created online support programs for that. We created a coaching practice, a consulting practice, all around this message, connection cures contention, and these four critical behaviors. And
these four, what four are those?
These four behaviors are called talk with, work with, build with, walk with. And they're all focused on what we call the with space. And the with space is a very simple idea of connection. It's a way of seeing connection. Imagine a Venn diagram, two circles. You're one circle, I'm the other circle. Mm-hmm. We want to connect in some way. We don't have to perfectly overlap to connect. Even the tiniest bit of overlap is enough to build a connection. So our first message is stop trying to find people who are exactly like you. Mm-hmm. Because when you try to do that, I found two things happen. You end up in control mode, which is, I've got to fix you because you're not exactly like me. Or you end up in cancel mode, which is, because you're not exactly like me, you need to go away. And those opportunities get lost. So what if, and this is why many of the things that accompanied COVID really brought out this to me, which is, why can't we just find small areas of connection? And then it became, well, how do you find them? Well, the first thing you do is you stop talking at people and you start talking with them. You stop working for people or expecting people to work for you, and you start working with them. You stop having people build your dream and build with them on our dream. And then finally, you walk with people, which is you never get too far ahead or too far behind. You learn something that years ago, in a book called Everything You Need to Know, they teach you in kindergarten. One of them is hold hands when you cross the street. Right. Walk with is based on the simple premise that whether it's metaphorically or literally, when you build your team, you've got to hold hands.
Yeah.
So
wow.
That's what it is. Build with spaces using four behaviors.
There's something I'm thinking about with that. When you hear the phrase or the word withstand, what comes to mind when you first hear that word, withstand?
Actually, the first thing that comes to my mind, for some reason, it flipped it in my head, which is stand with.
That's what I was thinking. Because so withstand, the way that you're able to stand is with people. People always think of it in the negative sense. If you can withstand what happened, if you can withstand the storms. No, if you can stand with someone in the storm, you have strength, you have support, you have a reason to keep going. If you ever feel yourself isolated and alone, you need to reach back and find out where's the hand you're supposed to walk with. I promise you, you're not alone. You're not the only one. you're talking to corporations, you talk to individuals. Tell me, how do you train people?
You mean if they're in an experience with us, or how do we train them so they can train others?
No. So that do you work with businesses mostly, or do you work with individuals mostly?
Right now, we're working with businesses mostly.
Okay.
Another lesson I learned from Hiram is a concept he called breeder effect. And breeder effect was, he said, don't separate B2B, business to business, from B2C, business to consumer. He said, you don't know which way this relationship is going to grow. Sometimes you'll go to a business, and this was another thing that he taught me so powerfully. He said, never forget that everybody is just people.
Yeah.
And so, because, sometimes in the business world, people are like, well, if I'm talking to business people, I can only use business examples, and I got to use special words, and I got to talk numbers and, KPIs. Yeah. And I was like, that's all nonsense. He said, they're folks. They have dreams and fears and everything. So I learned just to talk to folks. So sometimes what we're doing is we're talking to folks in an organization, but we're sharing stories and examples that are as much about being good people and being good parents and being good sons and daughters as being managers.
Wow.
And so what happens then is you don't know which way it's going to go. So you might come into a business and then be going out to individuals and families, like, can you come talk to us, as couples? Wow. Or you might be going in with an individual who's going, oh my goodness, I think even though this is personal, we could use this at work.
Well, I was thinking about this aspect of it. When people say I'm going to separate business and profession, I've never been able to do that. Because I take it personal if you do something dishonest to me. It's like, well, hey, in business, you get what you deserve, not what you get what you negotiate, not what you deserve, right? I'm like, no. I want to work with people who do right, who have a mindset of right, who see a win-win, not I can take advantage of you and move it forward. And so I love the fact that everything that I've heard from you is dealing with contention, bringing it to connections. So you erase the contention and you go in contention together towards a goal. So the only thing that you're against are the things that would break up the connection. That's the wins. You have businesses and lives. What are the testimonials? What are things that people say after going through your program training?
Well, so the evidence that you're a Christian, the Bible, that you're dealing always in business fundamentally with the parable of the sower or the parable of the seed. So if a good seed falls in good ground, it will grow if it's nurtured. So the testimonials are basically either, will you come back? That's one of the, and I mean, I could give you specific testimonials, but that's the general thing. If you invite me back into your business, into your home, and into your life, you've obviously felt something and found something useful. And the second one is if it spreads. So not only does that seed sprout, but suddenly there's seeds sprouting everywhere. And so that's what we're discovering. You never own an idea, as you know. Right. You get to hold it for a while.
That's it. Yeah.
And right now we have this opportunity, and I don't think it's too bold to say this blessing, to hold this idea of the with space and of building connections. And as we have shared it, it's been almost instantly resonant with people. Like, when you just they say, oh, you wrote a book, what's it called? Connection Cures Contention. They immediately are like, what does that mean?
Right.
Because we tried to create everything, and I tried to write this book from the perspective of, I'm just a guy, and Heather and I are just a couple, and we are business people, yes, and we are humans, yes, but what has our experience been? And then to say, what have we noticed in others? And it's because all the book is telling stories from all over the world. In fact, we have these little Mercator maps, these projections of the world that show you for that chapter where the stories are coming from. And we've made sure that there are stories from all 7 continents.
Well, wait, I got to say something to you. I think you understate the value you bring to the table because you were like, we're just. you're a rarity. There are most people that don't have the years that you have dedicated to a marriage. There are people that don't have where they stood in to be a dad. There are people who haven't overcome the fact that they were adopted. There are people that haven't been able to understand that you can partner with someone, or that you can take a moral ground and give up on a dream and get derailed and end up here. Because of that, you're made up different. But that makeup that was different about you, you're sharing with the rest of us. You're doing it with us. And so the contention that you had to face allows us to be able to stand in your face and learn from you. You have businesses and people that you are impacting lives. And I know that one of the markets you touch all over the world, you mentioned 7 continents, but is there a market you need to penetrate or desire to penetrate? Where are you now? Because I know that you're touching all 7 continents, but where's the market you want to go next?
Well, this is very bizarre because of how business usually starts. Mm-hmm. But we have found we have got traction everywhere but in the United States. Okay. We have customers in the United States. We do work in the U.S., but not to the degree what you would think. Canada, Mexico, Europe have just, and they're primarily because of relationships. But, we're not here trying to build an empire. We're trying to share a message. And if the empire evolves, then so be it. What we look to do wherever we are, like I'm going to get on a plane tomorrow and I'm going to fly to Canada and just like you do some speaking events, is just we are looking for opportunities to share the message and let that seed grow where and how it wants to grow.
I will tell you this. It is, TTE is talk to everyone. And because you spoke with me, there are other people that got to hear you today because of that conversation. Every message can be great, but it takes a messenger, and you're that. I'm thankful that you were humble enough to learn from a mentor until you became a peer of his, and then you were able to peer ahead and see Jeremy and know that his value and the fact that it's time now to bring it to the U.S. I want not only continued success for you, but I don't believe you've peaked yet. There's more that you need to pour out. At the end of our days, at the end of our moments, you and I, there's going to be a scene like the end of Schindler's List. And the most powerful moment about that movie is this. He takes off his watch and he says, how many more lives could I have touched? It wasn't about the number we counted of what he won. It was the mission. It was like, could I have achieved one more? Could I have saved one more? And so as you continue on as a messenger with a message, I hope you reach one more. Because you are a peak performer. Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in. What he shared was from the heart. It's about going with someone. Perhaps there's contention that you're dealing with, but contention gets cured by connections. Pick up their book. The company is not only touching the rest of the world, but it can change your world. Make sure that you become a peak performer by peeking into their book. It will change the way you look.